The headline that has dominated football this week, reputations have been on the line and reputations have been vehemently defended of both the umpiring fraternity and Nick Foot. And, of course, Zak Butters, Sam McClure. So let's start with you. I said we'll hear from Matthew Richardson, the CEO, but maybe just frame the week and where we're at right now for us.
Well, let's start from 10 minutes ago, and that was really the audio that has emerged of Matthew Richardson, the Port Adelaide chief executive, essentially calling for a reform of the tribunal system. Now, he echoed the sentiments of Ross Lyon, who spoke in Glenelg a little earlier in the day, who said there's just been so much harm caused to all the individuals to go through the tribunal process. Matthew Richardson has said it's not only harming the people involved, but the families. And you can understand where this has all come from, but and it's easy to sit back and smash the AFL. The AFL tried to get this done and sorted and handled well before the tribunal. Now, Greg Swan, one of the most experienced administrators that the game has seen, to be honest, who was brought into AFL House for specifically these sort of situations, Hutto, for a calm hand. He went to both parties. He tried to get them on a Zoom together. Neither wanted to be part of it, both defending their patch vehemently, to use the appropriate word that you just did. The AFL felt the only way for this to go forward was to essentially play it out in court, which is the Tribunal Football's version of court. Now, I think separately to this, Hutto and boys, is that there's been surprise from footballing parliaments, including both the umpiring fraternity and also Port Adelaide, that the tribunal was able to come to a conclusion which really sat in the middle of both parties' realities, and that the tribunal didn't say we couldn't come to a conclusive response in the end. So, look, it's been a chaotic week. Could the AFL have handled it better? Perhaps. We'd love to hear from the callers on this. Where do we go to from here? Well, it's going to play out at an appeal level, Hutto, which is fascinating in itself.
Let's hear from Matthew Richardson, the CEO of Port Adelaide, first and foremost.
All three individuals deserve better than what this week has put them through. Port Adelaide's position is straightforward. The tribunal process needs to be reformed. It is too legalistic, it's too adversarial, and it places people under a level of scrutiny and stress that is disproportionate to the nature of the incident.
Is that over dramatic, or is that fair enough?
No, I think it is. I think it's. I think it is what he said it is. I think you go to these things. It's he said, she said, out on a footy field, and it does feel a little bit too much to be going to a situation where you feel like you're actually in court, you're under oath.
How could it have been resolved, Richard?
I just don't know. My biggest thing here, and it's probably where you sit, is that I don't know how you could have come to that conclusion. There's no hard, strong evidence supporting basically what the umpire said or what Zak Butters is saying. So
particularly without the microphone camera.
Yeah. So how can you come to a conclusion where you decide that one person is basically telling the truth and one isn't? And I'm not saying that Nick Foot isn't telling the truth. That's his version. But Zak Butters' version, to me, hasn't been heard.
Hutto, you covered these for a long time as a reporter. Sitting back and watching this all play out, what's been your view?
Well, my feeling has been just constantly amazing. Beaver, you and I have been around for roughly about the same amount of time, maybe a fraction longer. But
a fraction?
You get amazed that there still can be a case and a story which you haven't seen before. My early days, I certainly had through 100 tribunals. I can't quite remember a case exactly like this. I feel like they could have easily come to a no result and had that. Well, we're not saying either of you are lying, but the microphone thing, I think, is the sort of question I actually did some digging on, because I was fascinated to think, well, how could it not have been there? But having spoken to a couple of people about it, those microphones are incredibly directionally.
Yeah.
And so, we often have players mic'd up, for example, and if they are not looking directly at you, so for in this case, if Butters was, say, on a side or behind, then it is quite normal for that not to be picked up. So the conspiracy theories around that, I was kind of ready to buy into.
It's the one time you were desperate for the audio. It's the one time we haven't got it.
And amongst all the mess, we've even learnt new things during the week. I wasn't aware, in all the years of covering footy, that a player, even if it's the captain, once he's been reported, he's not allowed to access or talk to the umpire. Which originally that was added to Port Adelaide's angst, because they felt disrespected that Zak Butters couldn't speak to Nick Foot. And to your point, Campo, about could this have been, I think that's what you're alluding to, why couldn't this have been a conversation in the rooms away from cameras and microphones post-match.
The thing that no one's explained to me is why is it, if it's such a heinous crime, why is it only 15?
That's the thing that's completely incongruous with the entire situation, Campo. If Zak Butters has in fact been found guilty of essentially calling an umpire a cheat,
he has.
How is it a fine?
No, I agree. And the other thing that staggers me, and I listened to the playback, the relevance of his prior. I don't understand that. The fact that, you know, the chairman or the chairwoman said because of Zak's history around how many times he's been suspended and fined and whatever. Well, how's that? This is a separate...
His history's always around its incident in the
that's
game,
irrelevant.
not talking to an umpire.
And
Correct.
also,
And
that's
irrelevant.
Punishment
I don't
rather
get
than
that.
whether he's guilty or not. So I agree. That's a blurred line to me.
Yeah, I didn't like that. Because when you go into a tribunal, and we've all been there, Richo, it's not, because you've done this before. And this is a completely... It's not like he's had 4 striking charges and this is the 5th time that he's done it. This is completely different.
The first time he's been charged with anything like
that's
this.
the bit that I didn't like.
So a question back to you, Sam. The two cases shouldn't be compared, but they have been because they've happened virtually at the same time. So how do we sit with his second offence for... Let's not forget about how we got to the 2 guilty verdicts, but we have got to 2 guilty verdicts. So basically calling someone a cheat, $1,500 fine, to a homophobic slur, a 9-match suspension.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Again,
gap just seems...
inconsistent. Totally inconsistent. I mean, there are so many issues here that have become these side stories. So, for instance, Matthew Richardson, deep into his press conference, went for about half an hour, made a very good point in response to a question, which was, I think, given what happened with Jason Johnson, who was on the tribunal, for those that didn't know, had to leave the Zoom for 10 minutes, and when he came back, was in the car driving. Now, Jason Johnson had an appointment. He was very upfront to the AFL about that, so no one's placing blame on him. But, compare that to... I help out a team that's in the VAFA. If there is a VAFA tribunal hearing, they have a pool of people for which they select from. So... Richo, if you want to sit on the tribunal this Tuesday, are you available? No, sorry, I'm taking my girls to footy training. I'm not. Okay, well, then we go to Campo. This is $1 billion industry.
Sam,
that was not appropriate.
Sam, what about before the hearing even went to the tribunal, there was talk that it was only going to be a fine before they went.
Yeah.
How can that be the case?
He got charged with that, didn't he?
Because of the certain charge of abusive language towards an umpire. But to your point... To your point, Richo, it's the AFL's game. They make the rules up as they go, quite literally. So if
how can you have the 1,500 before you even get in there? That to me, is stupid.
Can you imagine, Beaver and Hutto, what the Port Adelaide's response would be right here, right now, if he was found guilty and given a 4-week ban?
No, I agree.
It would be the equivalent of the bigger story.
We'd be going to court.
We'd be going to court.
No doubt. Look, let's go to calls. Maybe we can go down to Peter first of all, because he wanted to discuss the Jason Johnson situation. Peter, thanks for calling in.
Guys, thanks for having me, and I really love the panel you have on. So one of my points was that inconsistency with what was handed out. He's either guilty or not, and if he is, well, it makes a joke out of the umpire or the value of the umpire, right? So let's leave it at that. The other one with Jason Johnson is what happened between him leaving and rejoining? Did the hearing continue for those 10 minutes, or did they pause and continue again? That part I don't know, because I can tell you now, I've left corporate meetings with earphones on when you've had to as a last-minute thing. You can hardly hear anything while you're walking to your car. Once you get to a car, it's actually not as bad. But I'm just wondering what happened for those 10 minutes where he left and then came back on. Was it come back on, everything's continued? Jason, yep, whatever he said, guys, I'm on mid for that. Well, it just makes a schmozzle out of the whole process. And I think an appeal will be thrown out because they cannot be judged as a credible process to run the tribunal.
All right, Pete, it does add to the blurred lines. I mean, from what we've heard...
he said there was a comment, I think they interviewed Jason today, said he didn't miss any of the evidence or anything.
Yeah, it was during final submissions and he was still listening to it while he was getting to his car. But
we've all fudged a few meetings with the Zoom, haven't we?
Don't you
put mute on, Hudder.
How many of those legal briefings?
You just make sure you're
single
live, though.
I'm glad that. I have. I'm just checking,
have you? Yeah.
Just checking whether you...
Right. You are our fearless leader, remember?
Meantime, let's go to John, who's next on the Nick Third OC Open Line. G'day, John.
Guys, you're doing a great job with all this, but let me tell you, the league appoints a tribunal. The tribunal is told what to do by the league. Greg Swan and all his mates are meddling around, telling them before they have the hearing what the penalty is. A man of David Koch's stature understands the legal system. Why these people don't put out a Supreme Court injunction, you'd sort the Jason Johnson and the rest of that crap out and let a legal person protect the rights of the player before an independent tribunal, not a league-run tribunal, an independent tribunal, which the league says it is, and then pokes its nose in every portal and every door crack that it can get its nose in. It's a public disgrace.
Didn't Port Adelaide just say they don't want that, though? They don't want it to be such a legal sort of system?
That's true.
That's a fair point, Richard. They want common sense to prevail before we get to the courtroom.
Like a mediation process where you sit down and show a bit of common sense and say, hey, I think we've both heard different things here.
So can I ask you, as players, how much do you think Zak Butters' reputation is really going to be impacted? Like, do you think anyone is going to think less of him if he goes, look, I vehemently disagree with this. I stand by what I said, but I'm not going to take it any further because I just want to get on with playing football.
I could accept that he did that, but I can also see a world where he wants his name cleared because he didn't say what he said he's been accused of saying. So if he wants to fight it, go ahead, go the whole way.
No, I agree. I don't think he will get tarnished at all. Well, I think at the end of the day, everyone knows the way he goes about, the way he plays the game and his standing in the game. And I agree with Richo. It's more a personal thing for him that if he's really confident that he didn't say it, that he wants his name cleared.
And he clearly is confident.
Yeah.
And I can see, if he wasn't confident, would he really stand there in front of cameras after the hearing and say what he said? I don't think he would. I think he'd probably accept it and move on.
And the other thing too, Richo, we both played. Straight after the game, it's emotional as well. Like they lost the game. He's at 200 beats a minute, and he still had the poise to still have that conversation straight after.
And he wouldn't have known that there was no audio.
100%. So that's where I sort of,
Good point.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I mean, for him to say that after the games to the boundary rider, and
it was Xander, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Xander,
and not know.
who did very well, by the way, given that it was a big story. I mean, I was at the ground. It's easy to bypass what ended up becoming a massive story. But
how silly would he look if he said he didn't say it and then the audio comes out 10 minutes later?
Darcy is with us now. G'day, Darcy.
Yeah, hi guys. Look, I'm bloody puzzled, to be honest. The claimant, knowing the extent of the evidence that the umpire gave them, surely with the weakness of that, should have just pulled the event off. And instead of that, they went ahead and heard it and come up with some Clayton's decision.
Yeah, I guess when you've got an umpire who's in charge of the game saying confidently that this is what I heard, and he's charged him at the time.
You've also got the captain of the other team, though.
True.
So he's held in pretty high regard as well.
Yeah, he is, but he is the one answering to a claim at this point. So Nick Foote was absolutely adamant and remains adamant, Richo, that his reputation was impugned.
Yeah, and I get
he
that.
Wanted
and I'm not doubting
He wanted to clear that. So the AFL are then in a position where they can't just say, well, Nick, we've got two witnesses saying that you didn't say it, mate, so bad luck, we're going to throw it out. Because imagine what that would do to the relationship that the AFL has with its officiators.
And the body language of both parties suggests they both believe they were right. Nick
Butters
Foote
looked pretty bewildered to me.
Nick Foote didn't turn to Zak Butters and say, what did you say? It was like, blow the whistle, 50.
I heard what you said. I'm reporting you.
Yeah. And Butters equally is incredulous.
Are we all cognizant, were we all before, as much as we are now, of how sensitive the umpires are to this issue? Like, did you realise that as a player?
I can't say with certainty, but I think back in the day, in the 90s, I reckon there would have been instances of this sort of happening on the field.
Richo, you would have said plenty to umpires back
I feel
in the
like
day.
I've vehemently questioned the umpires a lot. Did I ever say... You definitely say that's wrong, that decision, but... Yeah.
Did you ever jokingly say, geez, are you on the take?
I feel like it's happened along the line somewhere back in the day. Come on, you're cheating. I feel that must have been said before on a footy field. Surely.
Maybe not in your end, but even...
we had a different relationship. But we had a different relationship, I think, with the umpires that
they used to answer you back.
Oh, used to get it twofold.
So was it a better relationship, Campo?
I think so.
Well, I think it was and it wasn't that, what people got to understand too, there's a level of frustration that comes with the players. Like, as I said before, we're on the rivet, we're competitive, it might be a really important time in the game, you understand when the game is, and it's just sometimes a release more than anything. It's not actually personal to the umpire.